Even busier.
All right, so I'm a little nervous about this one this morning because I already watched another preacher do a little preaching on Facebook, and I realized I'm nowhere near the preacher he is, So it's a little harder. I heard Andy Stanley one time tell a group of pastors, though, he said, if you preach from your weaknesses, you'll never run out of material. And I still remember that. I think there's a lot of truth, but I get that. So for the next 3 weeks, we're actually starting a new series today, talking about not only one of my greatest weaknesses, I think, but I bet one of yours as well. Although at my age, I thought I should have been kind of beyond this, but I've come to realize, this whole midlife crisis thing, it's kind of the same kind of comparison I dealt with as a younger guy, but now it's like the stakes are higher and I've got a lot less time to kind of meet my goals and stuff. But the more I talk with other people, I realize, okay, this isn't just me, and it really isn't just my stage in life. And then as I begin to compare myself, and my tendency to compare myself to other people who also compare themselves to other people, I feel better about myself for some reason for comparing myself to other people, which, I don't know, you tracking? It's a trap, and it's kind of like, you know what, if everybody else is struggling with this, we should talk about this. So now this probably began with me, maybe where it began with a lot of you, back in school. And for some reason, I have a hard time remembering like my elementary, middle school years, but I do remember high school. It was very rough for me. Maybe you can relate. I remember in high school, I wasn't very athletic, so I hated the athletes, right? And I wasn't like super smart. I got by, so I hated the really smart people. And I wasn't really all that, good looking or cool, so I hated the pretty popular people. So I went to a really small school too, so I was in a pretty small group after all of that. I was pretty much by myself. And it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the athletes or wrong with the smart people or, pretty people. I'm looking at a bunch of y'all right now, right? So it was just that it was probably easier for me to hate on them than to me look in the mirror and believe and say, okay, Dennis, you're never going to be athletic. You're never going to be smart. You're never going to be pretty. And again, I was in a small school, and I'd use that maybe even as an excuse, which is why maybe middle school, I can't remember, it was probably even worse. So maybe I've just kind of blocked it. But it got a little bit better as I got a little older, got into the later years in high school, eventually went off to college, met Kimberly, and she made me look and feel a lot better than I really was. But even then, okay, I remember Bible college, small Bible college, I'd go on these preaching trips, and we'd go all over, the Southeast, and I'd be hanging out with these other guys, these other pastor wannabes, and they were so much better than me, and they could preach so much better than me, and there was still some of the same pressure to be somebody, but now I'm on this small Christian college campus, so we somehow spiritualized the whole thing. But I still hated everybody. And now some of you, I get it, you're way more mature than me, and you're hearing me talk about hating on all those people, but we live in a world where it just seems like we're always looking around. We're just always trying to figure out, like, how am I doing? How do I compare? Am I acceptable? Am I measuring up? And basically, we all want, like an at the end of all the adjectives we use. Like, I want to be richer. I want to be prettier. I want to be skinnier, smarter, taller, happier, hipper, whatever, right? Talenteder. But because I think, hey, if I just had more than you, if I had more than most, then I'd feel better about me. And I like you and everything, and you're great, but I just like to go away from a lunch or a coffee sometime. I'd like to be able to leave a group and go home at night saying, you know what, they're great, but I'm greater. I'm gooder. And then it's even worse because if you remember when you started dating, you wanted your boyfriend or your girlfriend to be richer or prettier or skinnier or whatever. Then you got married and you came in with lots more with, what you wanted from your spouse. I want them to be more. And then the problem is we lie to ourselves because we like to tell ourselves something like, I just want my husband, I just want my wife to like reach their full potential. Yeah, so we start kind of erring them too, but then you know what? It's not even really about them, is it? It's about what people think about me and what they're doing is saying about me, and then you have kids, And then you see what everybody else's kids are doing in school, right? And you hear about what everybody else's kids are reading, how advanced they are, and they skipped a grade, and how they're playing up in sports. And then you start comparing your kids. And again, it's not even really about your kids. And you're like, okay, well, you lie to yourself again. I just want my kids to be successful. I just want my kids to reach their full potential. I mean, no, you're really comparing yourself to other people through your kids. You're comparing your parenting skills to other parents. And you love it, okay? You won't admit this, but just be honest in your heart. You love it when other kids, when your friends' kids mess up, don't you? Yeah, you love it. You love it when they get in trouble. You love it when they don't get a scholarship. You love it when they don't get into the school of their choice. And you can't say that, right? Because you're good Christian folk. You're like, oh, well, I'm so sorry. Like, what is that? I mean, that's evil, isn't it? If you don't believe in the concept of sin, just think about yourself when you have those kind of feelings. Like, where does that even come from? But you know it's in you. And if you don't think about it, your feelings of elation when something bad happens to someone you care about, but you secretly kind of compare yourself to it, what is that, okay? And then there's the other side of it. There are people who really do have a little bit more than others do, but maybe not in a good way. Like maybe, we often look at them because they're a little heavier, they're a little slower, their son is a little slower, or, I've noticed your daughter's a little shorter, or, and they're a little poorer. I'm a little nerdy, but they're nerdier, whatever. And then we have another problem because we then start to feel superior, and we know we shouldn't feel that either. So I mean, it's just you look around at people that are better than you, then you look for people that aren't quite as good as you, and you're kind of stuck in the middle, and either way you look, there's just, there's this comparison trap, which is what we're talking about. It's and I don't have to tell you what a bad habit this is. I don't have to tell you that it doesn't take you anywhere. There's really no win in all of that, but there we are. It's where we find ourselves. So then to build just kind of a foundation for this a little bit more, there's another subgroup among us, sort of a subcategory, where we're not happy with the ER at all. We want EST, right? I don't want to just be richer. I want to be the richest. I want to be not just healthier. I want to be the healthiest. I want to be the retweetedest. I want to be the est, and I want to be in a category all by myself. So that when people compare themselves to me, there is no comparison, right? I'm the me everybody wants to be, and I'm not saying this is me. I've met people like this, and again, okay, you lie to yourself, and you say, well, I'm just reaching my full potential, right? Sounds good. I'm just not going to settle for anything but my best. Great, and as we're going to see, there's a place for all of that, but there might be this little thread of this other sickness in you. I know it's in me where I'm just constantly measuring myself by the people around me, where I'm constantly trying to prove my worth by comparing myself to other people. And okay, hopefully you are way, way, way farther down the road in this than me. Like maybe a minute ago when I said, I hate athletes and I hate whatever. You're like, oh, Dennis, don't be a hater. And I'm very proud of you if you've never felt like someone was better than you and you didn't hate them. Good for you. But maybe, okay, you're on the other side of this because you look in the mirror and you realize, okay, I get it. It's not his fault that he's richer than me. It's not her fault that she's prettier than me. It's not their fault that, their kids are smarter than mine. It's really not their fault. It's not my fault. You look in the mirror and you hate you. You hate you, and you just don't like you, and that's a really, really hard thing to grapple with and admit. And the reason maybe you don't like you is because you just believe you'll never be fill in the blank as they are. I'll never be whatever that is as they are. You just don't believe you'll ever measure up. You may never be that happy. Right? You may never have that great relationship. You may never have that kind of financial margin. You may never look like that, live like that, drive like that, right? Live like that. Your kids probably aren't going to go to those kinds of schools. And you look in the mirror and you look at your life and you just, what do you do? So the bottom line, okay, if you happen to fall asleep on me in the next couple of minutes or you just don't come back, here's the one thing I want you to take with you and don't forget, okay? If this one thought would help reset our thinking in terms of this whole conversation on this topic. This could be a real game changer, okay? And it's simply this. There is no win in comparison. There's just not. There's no finish line. There's no arrival to it, right? There's just no final sense of satisfaction. In fact, okay, it's really dangerous because some of you, okay, if you were really honest, you have financial debt. You're strapped because of this thing. You've purchased things, right? You're driving things. You're living in things, wearing things. You've eaten things. You've done things. And the only reason you did those things is because you saw what other people were doing. And now you have, debt because of it. And it's so dangerous. Some of you might be driving your spouse crazy. Or you're driving your kids crazy. I mean, you're just kind of pushing them and trying to change them. And again, okay, you lied to yourself about this. In fact, you've even lied to them maybe. But much of what you're trying to get your spouse or your kids to be or not be, it's really so much about me. It's about you. And it's a dangerous thing, all right? You know how far this can go? The wisest man who ever lived other than Jesus, Solomon, King Solomon, he said this in Proverbs. He said, envy rots the bones. It's a pretty graphic statement about this ugliness, right? And that's what he's saying. There's no win in comparison. So what do you do, okay? What do you do about that? I mean, your mind just kind of goes there, right? You don't like it, but it just goes there. How do you motivate your kids to be their best? How do you motivate your husband or your wife to improve and be their best self, right? I mean, we've got to improve. We've got to work hard. We have to do our best. I mean, there's all of that. But how do we do that and not slip into this comparison trap where there's no win and we're just completely, constantly frustrated about everything? Well, I want us to look at something else that Solomon wrote in the book of Ecclesiastes. And this is cool because even if you're not like a God person, maybe somebody dragged you here today or you're watching reluctantly, or you don't know about Jesus or the Bible, if you'd still just give yourself permission, just read through the short book of Ecclesiastes. Here's what'll happen, okay? You'll be reading through this book and you'll be like, wow, okay, yeah, I get that, right? That's I remember that in a song, right? I think I get that. It's amazing what's in Ecclesiastes. It's like way before Jesus, so it's a great place to start, even if you're kind of a skeptic. But it's packed full of all this wisdom that is still so relevant. So Solomon was a guy who did way more than you'll ever do. He accomplished, way more than we're ever going to accomplish. You're not going to keep up with Solomon. Solomon was known as the wisest man in the world, created one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, right? He was the wealthiest person in his lifetime. Like other kings and queens would come to Solomon to get wisdom from him. So Solomon, he looks at the world and he addresses this issue of our tendency to compare ourselves to other people. Here's what he says. He says, and I saw all the toil and all the achievement spring from one person's envy of another. He's kind of like, okay, I've been watching people. And, I've kind of been a student of behavior. And I realize for the most part, what drives people, he says, is competition. And that can be good. But the thing that drives people is, okay, they're looking around and they're trying to figure out what everybody else is doing and where they're shopping, what they're wearing, how much they're making. And all this toil, all this achievement is driven by what they see other people around them doing. And so now I read this and I'm like, wow, okay, this was 3,000 years ago. This has been going on for a long time. And his summary, this is his summary of this whole idea. This is amazing. He says, this too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. So it's like, Solomon, okay, what do you think about all of this comparison stuff? People looking around, other people determine how I'm doing. He would say, it's meaningless. It's empty. It's a chasing of the wind. And that's a brilliant phrase because think about it, right? You can't catch the wind. You ever chase the wind? It's kind of a silly phrase because there is no finish line. There's no sense of satisfaction. There's no completion to it. There's never tranquility. There's never peace. To which some of you might already be thinking, okay, so what is he saying? What are you saying, Dennis? We're never supposed to try to be our best. We're never supposed to, do our best, to even try. Are you saying we're just supposed to kind of fold our hands and sit back and let life happen to us and be happy about it, right? Of course not. Solomon is the wisest, wealthiest man who ever lived in his generation. So his very next statement to us is this. He says, no, fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. He's like, okay, don't think for a minute that I'm trying to tell you not to be ambitious. I'm Solomon, right? Have you seen my temple? Right? Have you seen my gardens? I've literally got hundreds of wives. So, I lived in a different time and culture, but I'm a busy guy. I got a lot going on. I've got more gold than Fort Knox. I'm Solomon. So I'm not saying at all that you just sit around and do nothing. You don't leverage your potential. You don't become the best you can. I'm not saying any of that. Only fools, he said, would fold their hands and do nothing. And the idea in this little verse is actually, okay, if you do nothing, you self-destruct, you spoil, you ruin yourself. Okay, well, then what are you saying, Solomon? Kind of contradictory a little bit. So in this next verse, I'm telling you, okay, if you've never really been a memorizer of Scripture and you ever wanted to start, this would be a great one to start with, because the whole idea here is that there's no win in comparison. Okay, here's kind of his idea of unpacking that. Here's what he said. It's so cool. He said, better is one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. So he goes back to this phrase a little bit again. This is brilliant. And the Hebrew imagery here is that it's better to have like one hand open. The implication that God can still put something in this. You can still get something you don't have if I leave one hand open, right? Whatever God chooses. It's better to have this one hand open, to have only what one hand can hold, than to have two hands closed fist around closed tightly around whatever I can hold on to. It's better to have one hand open with tranquility. It's better to have one hand open learning to be content with what I do have over here than to have two fists clenched around everything I can get. Because now I'm done. Right? He said, because if you live like this, there's never going to be any peace. There's never going to be fulfillment. It's chasing after the wind, because once you've tightened your fingers around everything that you can get, there's always going to be something else out there that I want to be able to get, but I can't. And so you're never going to be at peace. There's never going to be any contentment like this. In this case, Solomon, richest guy, wisest guy in his generation, he says, I've been watching this, and here's what I've determined, all right? Better one handful with tranquility than two fistfuls of stuff you can't ever be satisfied with. Now, if you just let that thought, that imagery kind of sink in, and as you begin to kind of reach for more, and you begin to ignore your family because of this great big opportunity, this great big deal, or as you start to compare your daughter to someone else's daughter, you start to push your son to do things that someone else's son has done. And as you begin to bring up that little issue with your wife again and again, you realize it's really not my issue. It's not her issue. It's my issue. You pause and you say, okay, whoa. Why am I doing this? There's no peace here. There's no tranquility there. God says, okay, that's why one handful, one hand open is how you get tranquility in your life. And so Solomon doesn't stop there. He keeps going. He gives us another visual. He said, again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. It's like somehow Solomon, wisest man in the world, he can even make meaningless things interesting. So here's what he says. He says, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother, which meant in this culture, he didn't have anybody to leave his stuff to. There was no heir. Women back in this day, they couldn't inherit anything thousands of years ago. And so he says, okay, there's this man. He had no one to leave his stuff to. He's all alone. And yet, okay, check this out. He had neither son or daughter or son or brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. He says, okay, so here's this guy. I'm watching him. Maybe he's a friend of mine. Maybe he represents a group of people. But they work and they work and they work and they get a lot of stuff, but they're never content. There's always more to do. There's always another goal. There's always something else to achieve, which on the front end might sound good. But he says, okay, this guy or this group of people, one day in the middle of all this toil and all this achievement, never being content, yet no one to leave all of the stuff he's accumulated to, he stops. This man, this guy stops and asks a very, very important question. And again, okay, so you're going to hear this question. It's a question we have a tendency to give a really quick answer to, but it's a question we should really pause, I think, and kind of think about. All right, here's his question. For whom am I toiling? Like, why am I doing all of this? Why? Why do I live like this? Why is it I can't just stop, take a breath, and just enjoy what I have? Why can't I enjoy what I've spent my entire life in order to get? What's in me that I just got to keep churning it out? I got to keep churning it out, and I know I'm going to die, and it's not going to go anywhere even. But I get this stuff, or I get this family, and I'm not even really enjoying it. And he says, what am I doing this for? Who am I really doing this for? What's driving me? And so Solomon says, well, it's kind of what we talked about a couple verses ago. It's human nature, unless you do something about this, to be constantly comparing, to be constantly competing. And then Solomon, he summarizes it this way. I love this. He says, this too is meaningless, a miserable business. As long as you're trying to always have two fistfuls, two handfuls, and realize I wish I had a third hand because there's all this other stuff out here that I want, it doesn't matter what you accomplish. It's not going to matter how smart your kids are. It doesn't matter, how pretty your wife is. It doesn't matter how much money you have. If your mindset is all about this, it's a miserable business because you're never going to be able to enjoy your life. Bottom line, okay, there's no win in comparison. So what if we could somehow learn how to just catch ourselves when we start doing this with ourselves, right? We start to see this in our lives. What if we learn to catch ourselves like right before we just started closing our fists around everything, and then we're mad because I only have two hands and there's all this other stuff I want too. The bottom line is, okay, all of us are looking somewhere. We're all looking somewhere to determine how am I doing? How do I measure up? We all have some kind of standard that we're measuring against. And the thing is, okay, you've got to determine this. And you already have an answer to this, but maybe you just need some clarity. You may not know what it is, but we all have an answer to this question, okay? The question is simply this: what or who am I going to use to measure myself? What's going to be my reference point? Who's going to tell me I'm okay or not? What's going to tell me? And there's something in all of us that's looking for something or someone to tell us, okay, you're fine. You're doing good. Right? You're right where you need to be. You're doing exactly what you ought to do. You're okay. You don't need to do any more. You don't need to do any less. You're okay. That's what I want to know. So the question we're going to leave with today is simply this one, okay? Where are you looking? What are you using? Is it your dad? Is it family? Is it, your boss? Is it the industry or the career that you're in? Is it how you look, your image? You're measuring it by how well your kids are doing and what that says about you. What or who are you looking to feel like I'm okay? And Solomon says, listen, if you're not careful, if you don't catch this, then you're going to be like this, and you're never going to feel satisfied. And no matter what you achieve and what your family achieves and how much you can hold in your two closed fists, whatever he looks like, what she looks like, what you drive, where you win. Solomon, who had everything, said, I'm just telling you, okay, I've been there. I didn't say no to anything. And it's a chasing after the wind because you never get what you're looking for. All right, so next week, we're going to continue looking at this grip. But before I let you out here today, okay, I want to leave you and ask you a few of these quick kind of make you mad, I wish Dennis would have stopped 5 minutes earlier kind of questions to wrestle with, all right? Here's the first question I want you to think about. Are you exhausted from trying to keep up with, you fill in the blank, whatever's coming to mind right now? Like, are you exhausted? Are you wore out? Are you tired? I mean, like, come on, let's be honest. Be honest with yourself here. Is there something in you that's like, I wish I didn't even know what they had. I was happier before they got that thing, right? I wish I didn't even have to know where they were going on vacation. Because in our culture, okay, especially around here, here's the truth. I think sometimes if you live way out in the middle of nowhere, like out in the country or maybe in some other country, maybe where they didn't have as much, and it's just you and your spouse and your 2.5 kids or whatever, and once a month, okay, you had to go into town to get your supplies, and you came back home and there's no internet. I think you would be so content if nobody else was living any better than you were, because it's perception. It's perception that drives our discontentment, but perception isn't going away. So we all live with this. So let me just ask you something. Are you exhausted? Is there something in you that you're just kind of like, man, I'm tired of this hamster wheel. I just wish I could give up at some point, and everybody else just quit, and we're all happy. And I can't, trying to keep up. Second question, are you broke from trying to keep up with whatever that is? And just be honest, okay? Is this part of maybe your financial issue? Because, yeah, I mean, you blame it on debt, you blame it on the economy, you blame it on your job, you blame it on all that stuff. And that's real. But maybe at the root of all of this, where it all kind of started, maybe before those financial problems surfaced, there was something in you, and just for the sake of keeping up with, I don't know who, it has contributed to all those financial problems. I'm buying stuff that I don't really care about for people that I don't even like. And that's all I'm asking. Could that be part of the issue? Just be honest. Here's the third question. Are you allowing what others have to keep you from enjoying what you have? You got a good life. If you quit comparison, could you step back? You have 8.5-foot ceilings. But they got 10.5-foot ceilings, so now all of a sudden, every time I walk in my front door, I feel like I got to squat because it's so cramped in here, Your house was great. You got 3.5, 4.5 bedrooms, and they got 6.5 basements, and now you're miserable, right? And it just goes on and on. Are you allowing what everybody else has, what other people have, to keep you from really enjoying what you have? And you know what that is? It's a chasing after the wind. It's never going to satisfy, because even if you get what they have, guess what? Yeah, there's always going to be someone with a bigger, better, someone has another out there, and somebody even somewhere has an est. So are you allowing what you don't have to keep you from enjoying what you do have? And here's the last question, okay, and this is a hard one. What or who would you secretly enjoy seeing fail? And I struggle with this, okay, because I hate this question. Isn't this like one of the ugliest parts of the human experience? It's in our spirit, though. Isn't that the ugliest part of you? It's the ugliest part of me. When someone I say I care about, and I really do care about, or maybe someone that I've cheered for and I've encouraged and I've helped them take next step. It's a friend, But then you hear something bad happens to them, and of course you're on the phone saying, oh man, that's horrible. What can I do? How can I help? And there's still this little itty bitty something in you that kind of feels good about it or feels relieved about it, because it kind of humanizes you maybe a little bit. I don't know. But if you don't believe in sin, right? Isn't that's just ugly? And that's in me. And it's in you. Who would you secretly rejoice seeing fail that would make you feel better? All of a sudden, okay, that wrinkle-free life they seem to have, their cars don't even need washing, right? It's amazing how ridiculously great their life is. And then you hear, okay, well, no, there's a bump in their relationship. Or, there's a bump with one of their kids, and there's something in you that's just kind of like, okay, I'm relieved. I don't feel as bad about me anymore. There's some truth in that, but isn't that just kind of ugly? You know what that is, okay? That's the thing Solomon was talking about. Oh, I feel better because I only have 2 fistfuls, but they lost some of theirs, right? Imagine if all of that could just go away. And then I could rejoice with people when things go well for them, like genuinely. And I really could enter into the hard times and mourn with people when things don't go well. But see, okay, you're never going to get there by comparing. Because that's the point, okay? There is no win in comparison. And that's what I want you to take home with. That's what you want to wrestle with this week. You can't genuinely love someone if there's a part of you that hopes they will fail so you look better. You can't genuinely love someone you're pushing to perform better just so that you'll feel better about you either, right? In other words, okay, you can't really even be a sincere follower of Jesus and chase the wind at the same time. If you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is a profoundly spiritual issue for us. So together, I'm just encouraging us to learn how to knock this off, right? Let's just stop. Let's go from this to this. Let's stop chasing the wind, because here's what we all know, okay? There's no win in comparison. So we're going to pick this up next week. I hope you'll come back, bring somebody with you. Let me just pray with you. Father, I do thank you for the blessings that many times we are not grateful for because we're too busy looking at what's next, what's bigger, what's better. So, Father, I just pray this morning you would give us all just a moment to stop and reflect. God, just open our eyes and our hearts to what you have given us and help us to be grateful. God, help us to think about the bigger story that you've written for all of us and how living with two fists, grabbing everything that we can and never being satisfied keeps us from living the greater story, the bigger story that you've written for us. Give us the wisdom to know what to do with what we've just heard. And I pray you give us the courage to do it. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.